Over the last year, the Forward Planning Group has been looking at planning for the future for churches within Lothian Presbytery. Aware that it is a very challenging time for us as a church, and a whole lot of things that we see. In many places, dropping numbers of those attending church and an older age profile, a drop in the number of ministers of word and sacrament, a projected drop of 25% by 2022, potentially 50% within the next 20 years, and that a real concern for the church. Locally, we're aware some congregations struggling to find office bearers to fill key positions, and perhaps a pattern of decreasing income emerging. We're not quite sure about that, but there does seem to be something of that we're seeing at the moment. It's not all doom and gloom though, not all negative. Alongside that, we see that there are a few congregations that are experiencing a measure of numerical growth. They're seeing more people coming on a Sunday, not less. And some churches who are experimenting with fresh expressions of church, doing church in new ways, and seeing people come in and involved in those. Very early days in that, but exciting opportunities there. I've also been involved in some national work, so I've got a perspective, at least on what's being said nationally. And what seems to be, at the moment, is that folk are saying we need to do things in new ways whilst maintaining and developing some of what's in place. It's not about jettisoning all that we do, but we do need to develop some of what we've got in place, and we do need to develop new things. When we asked folk about that in a survey recently, over 60% of people were saying that we need that balance between developing the new and keeping the old going. A number of folks saying that we also need to adapt what we do. And those figures pointing to the awareness that we have that we need to do things in a different way. There's also an awareness that perhaps others are going to have to take on some of what ministers did previously. When we asked that question in the survey about whether others would need to take on what traditionally ministers have taken on, then we found there that the numbers were almost 60% who were saying that this is what needed to happen. Another 32% who were saying yes, but with reservations. So a recognition that things will need to change in that as well. People also see that working with younger generations is important, and that age balance within the church is something that we need to work on. When asked about whether we need to be clear on that commitment, almost 80% of people said that we did, with a further 18% saying yes, but perhaps with some reservations. So people recognising that that age profile is something that we need to do some work on, and a commitment that we need to make as a church. So what about us within Lothian Presbytery? Well, as a Forward Planning Group, what we'd be saying is that we need to create a vibrant Christian witness in every community across Presbytery. That's what we should be about. But we would also be saying that is not necessarily saying that we have a traditional Sunday morning service in every community, or that we need to have a church building in every community. We perhaps need to be creative in the way that we do things while maintaining a commitment to every community. We're aware that to do that, given the drop in number of ministers, we either need to effect lots of unions and links to match the number of ministers, or we need to develop a pattern where some churches thrive without a minister. And I use that word, thrive, rather than survive. And it's the second of these two options that the Forward Planning Group is suggesting is the way forward for us. So we'd be saying no major programmes of unions or links as we've done in the past, although we would consider that where congregations themselves wish to pursue it. But we're aware that that would mean that some parishes would function without a full-time minister of word and sacrament. We're also thinking that where a church is not sustainable, it may actually be preferable to dissolve it rather than unite it or link it with another congregation. That may be controversial, but that's certainly what's in our mind at the moment. When it comes to allocation of ministers in the plan, and we will need to look at that, we would be saying that the population of a parish should not be the only factor that should be taken into account, but neither should simply the ability of a congregation to pay their minister. We're not quite sure how all of those things and about the outreach of a church and how it's growing and how many folk are coming on a Sunday, how we balance all of those things, we are not sure. In fact, despite being a mathematician and preferring to have formulas, it may be that having a nice, neat formula is not the way forward for us. We're also aware that other forms of local leadership should be developed, including but not exclusively further use of ordained local ministers. That seems absolutely essential if we go down this road. We're also thinking that congregations engaging in active outreach and mission should be given incentives and support in developing this. In other words, that we should be saying to people, this is what it's about, and if you do that, then we will make sure that we support you and perhaps even financially support you in doing that. We also want to make sure that we allow for and encourage development of new models of church with ongoing support provided for these kind of ventures, the fresh expressions that I mentioned early on, and perhaps in the sheets you have this evening, you'll have an example of one church in Halifax, which would be a fresh expression of church. Your feedback on all of this would be appreciated. We don't want to move on with this without knowing that we have the support of others. There will be full discussion of this at the June Presbytery, but we would also look forward to getting things back from your Kirk session. Hope you enjoyed discussing this. I'm sure you won't agree with all that I've said, but we look forward to hearing what you've got to feedback.